Buongiorno Tim Banfield. Sono contento venire qui a parlare con lei a Euroz Hartley, Finding the Front.
Welcome to Euroz Hartley's Finding the Front, where we get to know the people who front some of Western Australia's leading companies, providing you with real insights into the way they think and approach things, both in business and in life. So get the volume adjusted in your car or your headphones sorted and settle in for a great story. Here's your host, Tim Banfield.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another awesome episode of Euroz Hartley's Finding the Front. For those of you not familiar, Euroz Hartley's is a proudly Western Australian diversified financial services company. We specialise in the provision of private wealth, corporate finance, institutional sales and targeted research services. If you'd like to learn more about the services we provide, please don't hesitate to visit our website at www.eurozhartleys.com. Well, our very special guest for this episode is Tony Ottaviano, the Managing Director and CEO of Liontown Resources, stock code LTR. Tony, as you heard at the start, is of Italian descent and grew up in Perth, immersed in his family's Italian culture. After graduating from university with a Bachelor of Engineering, Tony embarked on a high-performing career, reaching senior management positions and along the way learning the inner workings of the mining industry. He then pivoted when he was approached to join Liontown, and he decided to make the jump from big corporate to a small company starting out. Well, the rest, as they say, is history. This is a cracking story. So without further ado, it gives me a huge pleasure to introduce to Euroz Hartley's Finding the Front, the MD and CEO of Liontown Resources and all-round great guy, Mr. Tony Ottaviano. Tony, welcome to Euroz Hartley's Finding the Front. It is really so good to have you on, Tony.
Great to be here, Tim. Really looking forward to it.
Good on you. If we just start off, one of the points around Finding the Front is learning a bit about your background. And one of the things which really caught my eye was that your mum and dad arrived in Australia from Italy, which was a really, really important part of your upbringing. And I just wanted to start there.
Right. Well, yes, I am a first-generation Australian. Mum and Dad were Italian immigrants. They came here separately. My dad came here to follow a dream. He met someone on the boat who convinced him to drop off in Perth, but he was on his way to Sydney. He sailed over here, and because at the time there was the 7-day war between Israel and Egypt, they closed the Suez Canal.
Right.
So Dad had to come the long way round through the Cape of Good Hope. And he told me the story that he had enough. It was so rough that by the time he got to Perth, he didn't want to do that extra leg to Sydney. So he dropped off here.
And that's where he landed.
And that's where he landed. And he spent 2 days at Frio Port until someone said to him, "Do you want a job?" And he said, yeah. So he got on the back of a ute and he drove, and it was quite hot. And he drove to a place that he could never pronounce, but it went like this, Gomaling, which was Gomaling, right?
In the wheat belt.
And he told me that he spent the first night on top of the wheat, because there was piles of wheat, to avoid the flies, and chain smoke while he was writing his first letter back to his mum. And that was Dad. So he spent 2 years clearing bushland for farmers.
That would have been by axe.
Yes. And he remembers making, back then the segregation was quite prevalent. So the immigrants weren't allowed to stay in the hotels, so they had to pitch tent. But the Australians found this smell of food that was coming through the tent area. So they would quite often have meals together.
Right.
So
we're talking circa 1959, aren't we?
Yes. So, and Dad would routinely come back to Perth to gather supplies, and then his sister emigrated out here, so he would stay with her. Now, Mum took a different route. Mum, at the age of 19, in a small place in Calabria, left Calabria under her father's instructions to go to Argentina because she had two brothers in Argentina who had pitched up there and weren't married, so they needed a homemaker. So at the age of 19, my grandfather put Mum on a boat, crossed the Atlantic, so she could be a homemaker for her two brothers. So she spent 13 years there, learnt Spanish, and she quite fondly remembers that time in Argentina. Then she went back because her father was ill after 13 years of not seeing him. And he passed away, but before he passed away, he said, "You've got two other brothers," because she had a big family. "You have to come to Perth because your two brothers need a homemaker there." And by that time, Mum had just turned 30. But she was fortunate. She didn't catch the boat this time. She actually flew, but it was multiple stops. And I still have her airline ticket. It was BOAC, and she stopped in Cairo, then Delhi, then Singapore, spent the night in Singapore, and then flew to Perth. I mean, and they met in a place when Dad was gathering supplies. Mum would do shopping for her brothers, and the only place in Perth that you could get anything continental was Kukulis. There was a grocery store in Northbridge.
Yeah, the famous Kukulis brothers.
Yeah, Kukulis brothers. And so the olive oil and all these other sort of natural ingredients that you require. And they met where Mum was complaining about the cost, and Dad just wanted a packet of cigarettes, Peter Stuyvesant, right?
Yeah.
And he told her to hurry it up, because he had to go, and they sort of clashed. And when she went home and told her two brothers, there was this guy that was really rude. They sort of said, "Well, we know him through the Italian community."
Yeah.
And the rest is history.
So she arrived in 61, your dad in 59, and then they met in 62 and got married.
Yeah.
It was pretty quick.
Yeah, no, I've done the sums a couple of times because I was born in October 63, right? I wanted to make sure.
So your brother and sister were born here?
Yes,
Yeah.
we all three of us were.
All of you, in addition, sorry.
Yeah.
Yep. And just tell us little bit about growing up. I mean, how did that unfold?
Yeah, look, Dad clearly was a labourer, but he did have a skill. He was an orchardist. So he was sought after by a lot of the farms around Perth, Pickering Brook, Kalamunda, to go and prune the orchards and nurture the fruit-bearing trees, right? But he couldn't make that a sort of sustainable living. So he worked as a labourer in many different areas. Ultimately, he went to the Swan Brewery, and he became a worker in the Swan Brewery for the best part of 25 to 30 years. But growing up, we didn't really see Dad much because he was working constantly in order to fund the family.
Yeah.
And Mum was the homemaker in every sense.
Yeah.
But she was a strong woman. And my brother and I and my sister, we all sort of grew up in Northbridge. And then at the age of 14, we all had small part-time jobs, and we had a very strict upbringing, as most of the Italians did at that time. And then, it was all about education. So we could break that sort of historical, uneducated type upbringing that my parents had, right? My father left school when he was 8 and Mum when she was 9.
Yeah.
Right? So
Which is very early, isn't it?
It is, when you think about it today.
Yes, that's right.
So that's how they the focus was on education. We lived in a small, which today would be worth quite a bit of money, a heritage home.
Right.
That her brothers bought in Perth in the early 50s. And then they bought her, when Mum and Dad got married, they bought her off her brothers in Northbridge in a street called Brookman Street. And I often bring my daughters there to show them. And it's right next to a mosque.
Right.
I don't know if you know, in William Street, there's Australia's oldest mosque situated there.
Right.
And we were right behind it. So we grew up with a whole collection of multinational people.
Yes.
Right. Yugoslav, so I learned to speak a little bit of Yugoslav, or there was Burmese, there was Indians, all sorts, Greeks.
Very multicultural.
Very multicultural. But as immigrants, you did not have the access to services as they do today. So you were thrown into schooling with everyone else.
Yeah.
You had to assimilate or perish.
Let's just focus on that because you went to primary school in Highgate, Northbridge,
Yeah.
and then you moved out ultimately to Balcatta.
Yes.
But how did you find school? Did you enjoy it?
It was tough, if I'm honest, Tim.
Yeah.
I remember saying to my mother, can I just have lunch like all the Aussie kids? Because they eat things like Vegemite rolls, they have pies, but we've got these continental rolls. Mama used to make these salami rolls with all sorts of, roasted capsicums, sun-dried tomatoes. And
Beautiful.
They would
Just beautiful.
Well, it is beautiful now, right? But back then, when we pulled out the brown paper bag, it was soiled with all the olive oil, right? And the Aussie kids would take the piss out of us, right?
Yeah.
But my brother refused to take his lunch out of his bag because he didn't want to be ridiculed.
Right.
So it was tough, and again, there's a theme that I'll talk about today around resilience.
Yep.
And that was the first introduction to it, right? Having to cope with being different.
Yes.
The second one was, as the oldest child, in the Italian community, my wife often used to tell me, Tony, your dad's been here 65 years and he still has broken English.
Yeah.
Why is that? Surely he would have learnt the language and been good at it. And I said, well, he's never had to practice it constantly.
Yes.
Right? Because when there was a business activity, I would be called in to translate.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Mm.
So I would translate for the family, for friends, for relatives. They would trot me out and I'd be the intermediary, right? I remember my uncle who had a bread delivery round and he refused to join the union. So I got trotted out to go to the TWU offices in East Perth and speak to John O'Connor, who at the time was the secretary.
Yes.
And I had to translate from my uncle to him to say, there is no way he's joining the union.
It's not
right?
going to happen.
It's not going to happen. and I was 11.
Yeah.
Right. So again, it was this responsibility at an early age, toughen up. These are adult themes that you have to get your head around.
Yeah, yeah. And you obviously did get your head around them, and it bred, as you said, a sense of resilience in you from an early age. Tell me, though, with your schooling, and I was interested in your view there on becoming educated, right? You were clearly very bright. I mean, you went on to do a Bachelor at Curtin University, a Bachelor of Engineering in Mechanical Engineering, which is no mean feat. And then you went on to do an MBA at UWA. But growing up through that environment and then going through primary school and high school, did you have your eyes set on anything particular? But you're obviously academic.
Yeah, that's a good question. I did, actually.
Yeah.
I had a dream to become an architect. And the reason I had a dream to become an architect is my cousin married an Australian girl who was a female draftsman or draftswoman back then. And there wasn't too many female draftswomen, right, back then.
Yeah.
And Pamela is her name. And Pamela took me under her wing and she used to draw me treasure maps because she was very, very gifted artistically. And then she taught me how, what she did as a living, right, the drawing and her artwork. So from a very early age, I said to myself, right, I'm going to be an architect just like Pam.
Yeah.
Right? So that was the pursuit. And I knew that I wasn't good with the spoken word in terms of English because that was my second language until I got to school.
Yeah.
But I was very good on the numbers. So that's where I had to go to a science-based degree.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why I didn't work out an architecture and I moved to engineering. Because I was crap at drawing. And I couldn't, they wanted to do a bit of artistic flair and I just didn't have it, right? So I quickly worked it out and left architecture and went to engineering.
A couple of filler jobs I noticed along the way.
Yeah.
Played drums in a band called Blend.
Yeah.
That's pretty interesting. Yeah, you obviously love your music. Here we are in a studio.
Yes. Well, I did. And it was many Italian families would emphasize education, but also music. So learning an instrument. Now, the choice I had was the piano accordion, which was the go-to for a lot of Italian boys, which I didn't want to play the piano accordion, right? So I wanted to be different and convince mum and dad that I wanted to learn the drums. So I passed all the music tests at Mount Lawley Senior High School, so I got a sort of a music scholarship at Mount Lawley Senior High, and that's where it all started.
Wow.
I needed buying a drum kit was a big cost for mum and dad.
Yes.
So I started off playing drums and learning drums on a rubber pad, and then it progressed. And then finally, through a part-time job, mum and dad supported, I earned enough money to buy the drum kit.
And you went on and loved it?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Do you still play?
Well, so what happened, what killed it in the end, and I might actually rekindle that passion, is because my first job was in the Pilbara. So I had to go up and live in single men's quarters.
So this was when you took on a graduate's role with BHP?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and I couldn't take the drum kit with me, right? So I got rid of it. And to this day, I haven't gone back to that love, which maybe as a result of this show, you might push me back into it.
Could be a good de-stressizer.
I think so. And
take it out on the drums.
The technology that's developed on the drums is phenomenal. So you don't need the big drum kit these days. You can have an electronic drum kit, which is quite portable.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So look, it's a good place to continue on, but you did end up deciding you were going to follow a mechanical engineer's role, furthering from your study with BHP, and you got into a graduate role.
Yes.
Which, I mean, a rotation style program.
Yes.
And I think what I took from there was that you got to spend a lot of time in Newman and Port Hedland.
Yes.
Which is, again, coming back to resilience. When you're being taken up there as a graduate, you certainly work it out.
Well, there's a funny story. It was a big decision to leave the family.
Yes.
I mean, the furthest I'd travelled was Yanchep north and Rockingham south, right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I'm going to the Pilbara. And I remember going to the airport.
We're in 1986.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember going to the airport with my uni mate, Mike Coote, who you couldn't get more Australian than Mike. Grew up in Orange Grove. And I said to him, look, I'll meet you at the airport and we can catch the plane together. So when I got to the airport, all my relatives had arrived to see me off, whereas Cootie turned up in a backpack and nobody else. And before he knew it, he got wrapped up in the kiss goodbye on both cheeks, right?
From all your relatives.
From all my relatives. At least 30 people there, right?
You're kidding.
Yes, to see us off, right? And he always brings that story up.
Did you enjoy that, though? Obviously, it resonated with you.
It did. And look, unless you played sport in these towns, it was pretty lonely.
Yeah.
So it was all about building those relationships and having that social network in these small country towns. There wasn't the ABC was the only television you could get, and so I played footy most of my career, but then I had a fairly serious knee injury, so I couldn't play up there.
Right.
So I then reverted back to my love of music.
Yeah.
And they did have in Newman a radio station, so I would play music in the radio station.
Is that right?
Yeah.
In the Newman radio station?
In the Newman radio station, yeah.
Music's got a bit of a theme with you, Tony.
It does.
You did that, and then you ended up going on and, I suppose, taking an opportunity with that base of going to Rio and working in Argyle Diamonds.
Mm.
So did you get a good rounding with that BHP graduate program?
Yes. Again, what I got from the BHP is I had a chief engineer at BHP called Peter Bullock. And the best advice he gave me as a young graduate engineer was, if you're going to be good, you need to feel the problems.
Yeah.
And what he meant by that is I needed to go out in the field and deal with the issues, both from a people perspective and from a technical perspective.
Yes.
Feel the problem, Tony. And so my time there was unbelievable. Not only had I sort of moved away from home, but it then started to expose to me as to what technically and from a management perspective, what could be possible.
Mm.
And I remember my chief engineer saying to me, there's a problem in the org truck workshop, Tony. Can you go down there and meet the foreman there? Now, he's a bit of a prickly individual, but you should be okay. So I thought to myself, well, I'll ring and tell him I'm coming down. So I rang him. It's Tony Ottaviano. I'm a graduate engineer. He said, congratulations, and hung up. So I remembered, feel the problem.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I went out and saw him.
Yeah.
And when he was in his office, he looked up and he said, who are you? And I said, I'm Tony Ottaviano. And he goes, Jesus, if I knew you were that big, I wouldn't have hung up on you. And there it goes.
Yeah.
And then I moved to Argyle because...
Well, you were 3 years with BHP in that role, and then another 5, well, nearly 6 years with Rio.
And the reason I went to Argyle was because it offered me a different type of experience. I had dry plant experience. Iron ore was crushing and screening and sorting. Argyle had genuine metallurgy. It was a wet processing plant, a whole different type of experience. And it was new. It was different. It set the standard in the industry. It was an amazing operation.
Yeah. Just with that time, you were responsible with that Argyle Diamond experience for delivery of maintenance and capital projects.
Yeah.
Which becomes a bit of a theme, this delivery of capital projects over your life.
Yes.
But that's where you sort of got your teeth into it.
Yes. And to me, there's a definite pathway. And again, it was nurtured by Peter Bullock and another guy called Wayne Warnock. You can only move into project delivery after you've at least experienced operations.
Yes.
Especially maintenance, fixing the problems, ensuring that when you build something, it's maintainable, it's reliable, it can give you access. You cannot disrespect the frontline worse by giving them equipment they can't maintain or can't operate. So you had to understand those fundamentals in order to be a good design engineer.
Yes. And that's where you grew with that basis or that outlook.
Correct.
Yeah. You went from there, you maintained your time with Rio but a different role. You went to Melbourne. From Newman and Port Hedland with BHP, across to Kununurra with Argyle and Rio, and then you went over to Melbourne
with a company called North Limited.
Yes, yeah.
And there was a small excursion I had in between that, which was once I worked in project delivery at Argyle, again, I quickly realised that I can only be the client, which we were, provides project leadership. The actual project management is done by the EPCM engineer.
Yes.
So again, what dawned on me is I can't be a good project manager unless I've worked at the EPCM side of it.
Yes, which is what North Limited provided you.
Well, actually, it was Bateman Kinneal.
Right. Oh, okay.
So I went in and became a consultant engineer, right? And what I often say to young engineers, reviewing a scope of work is one thing. Writing it from a clean sheet is another. So I had to learn to put together proposals, write scopes, and all those fundamental things, which when you sit on the client side, you just review.
Yes.
And by writing it, it helps you check your logic. Because clear writing equals clear thinking.
Yes.
So I needed to do that. So that's why it set me up. And then I said to myself, right, I'm ready to go back into corporate and be the project leader.
Because you had been on both sides of the fence.
Exactly. And that was the job at North. And North based me in Perth and then moved me to Melbourne.
Got it. So again, the theme around major capital investments, acquisitions, divestments starts to come to the fore.
Exactly, at North.
Yeah, yeah. And you clearly developed an interest or a skill set in this, which you continued to follow.
Yeah, that's a good question. When I joined North, it was in project delivery, but it was in a department that also did M&A. So what they would do is whenever they would do some due diligence, they would put together the team comprised of technical folk, project delivery folk, so that we could provide the commercial folk all the capital costs, operating costs, so they could build the financial model and then determine the value opportunity.
Yeah.
So me observing from a technical perspective, watching how the commercial people went, I said, well, I reckon I could do that too.
And that's
and
where
the MBA came into it.
Yeah, and you got to round your skill set.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, you took that into a role with Wesfarmers for about 3 years.
Yeah.
Which is quite interesting because, I mean, obviously that is a business that continues to grow. And your role, again, around acquisitions, divestments, supply, commercial projects, quite an interesting step out of – would you say that was a step out of mining?
100%.
Yeah.
And it was a deliberate.
Yes. So it's almost a pivot.
It was. And the opportunity presented itself there with a gentleman called Gene Tilbrook.
Right.
Now, for me, having understood the commercial elements and the commercial drivers in mining, I wanted to understand how the commercial levers and drivers were in non-mining businesses. So the Wesfarmers opportunity presented that. But what Wesfarmers wanted from me was my mining pedigree. So it was, worked both ways.
Yes.
I could get non-mining experience, and they owned at the time the Premier Coal down south. They also had a coal mine in Queensland. So it gave me exposure to both. And, yeah, it was a tremendous experience. Fundamentally, what I learnt there was the importance of detailed analysis, financial analysis, understanding the fundamentals. Can you read a balance sheet? Can you read a P&L? What's the connection between the cash flow statement, the P&L, and the balance sheet? Right? Understand the rhythm of the business. Is the business's working capital or revenue seasonal? Can you understand a business through its working capital that it dresses itself up at the year end, but then during the course of the year, it's not going so well?
Yes.
Right? And understanding what numbers are telling you. Is there a pattern that you need to pick up on when you look at a cash flow to do an MPV?
Yes.
These are all the sorts of things that Gene, he was a tough taskmaster, no question about it. But he was also a brilliant educator. So you had to take his idiosyncrasies because you would learn a lot.
Yes. Tell me, it's interesting you make that observation. Would you say that within each of the roles you developed a high-performance attitude to work? Like high performance was the accepted pathway.
Yes.
There was no room for mediocrity because I could imagine in that Wesfarmers role, high performance was.
It was everything.
Yep.
I suppose what I learnt was the only way you get promoted is to excel in the role that you were doing.
Yes.
Right? And I didn't focus at all on politics. If I did the job well and I was good at what I did, then promotion would come naturally. And that was correct to a certain point. When you got into the big organisations, then politics and perception played a big part in promotion.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, you did make a big move following your time with Wesfarmers for some 3 years to then go and join again back with BHP, an organisation you ended up being with for the better part of nearly 18 years.
Yes.
A big career move. And so how did that unfold? Because I would have thought you would have been quite happy at Wesfarmers.
Well, Tim, that was a big decision. I had to ask myself, Tony, you've made the break away from mining.
Yes.
Do you want a career path down this way through Wesfarmers and the Wesfarmers opportunities or elsewhere? Or do you want to go back into mining? Now, at that time, the China phenomena had just started.
We're early 2000s.
Yeah,
2003.
had just started.
Yep.
Right? And there was a momentum building. Where I came to, Tim, was whether I liked it or not, mining was my DNA. The people, the straight talking, the lack of polish to some extent.
Yes.
And I mean that in a nice way.
Oh, absolutely. I can tell.
So I said, Tony, that is you. So I went back, and it was like I went back home, because the moment the people who recognised me as a graduate and now to see me where I was, it was like I'd never left. So I picked up on that. But what I did come back with is infinitely more experience in a whole range of things.
Yes.
The importance of the 3 years at Wesfarmers, the rigour of the numbers, the analysis. I brought that to the table.
Yes.
And that's where I progressively moved my career.
In conjunction with being on both sides of the fence in the mining sector before that. So I've just sort of bunched this in, but you started out as Senior Manager, Strategy and Analysis. Again, you were able to review some of the major capital projects were going on.
Yes.
You'd spent a significant period of time as Vice President of Business Development for the iron ore. You went on to be Vice President of Strategy for Development and Planning. And then there's two others where we've got Vice President for Improvement Minerals in Australia and then Program Director of BOS, the operating system, the BHP operating system and improvement. Finally, filling out with Acting Group Performance and Improvement Officer. Now, that's 18 years wrapped up in about 5 points.
Yes.
Look, there's some pretty significant things in here in this period of time. I just want to touch on a few.
Yeah.
But so to start, when you were you were Vice President for the Business Development for iron ore. Now, what I could see there, you could set the strategic agenda for more than $30 billion of subsequent capital investment. Now, I started out earlier in our chat saying you started to lean towards this delivery of projects, capital investment, acquisitions, but this is another level, $30 billion.
Yes. To this day, I still can't get my head around the scale.
Yeah.
Right? The iron ore industry in Australia is where it is today because of its ability to scale, right? When you think they can put a ton of iron ore on a boat for $15 to $18 a ton, that's breakfast.
Yeah.
And that's only done through tremendous scale, the rail, the ports, the mines. So with that comes big numbers. And I remember when I was a graduate in the iron ore division, iron ore price was $15 to $17 a tonne. Right?
When you were a graduate?
When I was a graduate. And I remember back then there wasn't an index, so it was a negotiation with the Japanese steel mills. And a good friend of mine would lead those negotiations and argue a 20-cent improvement compared to now where it's a freely traded commodity. So that's the difference. And unlocking the price, the way Marius Kloppers led, was a game changer for the Australian industry.
Yes. What did you take away, though, from being in that role within iron ore? And you know, you had Rio, you had BHP, you know, Fortescue was in the wings there. So in early 2000s. So just how did you find the whole environment? Because at your level, you're dealing across the sector.
Yes. Look, it was a tremendous period where there was all this news coming out of China around its growth rates. We could not build fast enough. So my role was, okay, we understand the strategy, but how do we translate that strategy into tangible actions, right? What is the growth path in iron ore, and how do we do it as fast as possible? So laying out the various expansions, rapid growth project number 1, RGP 1, 2, 3, 4,
Yes.
4 getting dismantled, then the outer harbour. We're going to outgrow the Port Hedland harbour. We have to build another one, right? Do we look for new ports? These are things that we weren't contemplated since the early 60s. And we were potentially looking at new port facilities, right? Changing the operating model. We used to blend at the port, but now we blend at the mines so that we could ship final product or rail final product.
Yes.
Also these fundamental strategic decisions, product quality. Rio had gone out with the Pilbara blend, right? They assemble everything at the port, whereas we would have dedicated products. Area C, Yandy, Whaleback or Mount Newman blend. There was our competitor was different. Then came FMG.
Yes.
Who, because we had, let's say, an abundance of riches, each individual player, both Rio and BHP, there was all this ground that they said, it's low grade, we're not interested. So Fortescue were very opportunistic, picked up all this ground, and this ore was good ore.
Yes.
Right? And the rest is history.
Sure is. But in your role, being very senior within BHP, obviously had to take that third force in iron ore of Fortescue very seriously.
Yeah. Look, if I'm honest, and this is credit to FMG and to Andrew, no one took them seriously, not even the market, and we underestimated their ability to build at the cost they built at.
Yes.
At the speed in which they did, right? And this is a lesson that you learn in MBA, where industries that are essentially monopolistic, that you tend to take your eye off the ball, and then there are disruptors
that come in. Yep.
And we see that every time. We see history repeating itself. Uber and the taxi industry and many other examples. So there was an opportunity for a third force, and here we are.
It was grabbed.
Yeah.
One of the highlights of this period of time was that you were incredibly involved in the attempted takeover by BHP of Rio Tinto. An enormous deal. The merging of the two, the second and third largest iron ore producers. It must have been, if you go back and you think about where you'd come from to that point, you must have felt, I can't believe this, but I'm in it.
Well, I think we could spend a podcast just talking about that.
Yes.
To be honest. But there I was, ready to go on holidays to Singapore with my family, and Marius Kloppers calls me and says, you need to get on a plane tomorrow and go to London. And what I'm about to tell you is we're doing this, this, and this, and you can't even tell your wife. You just need to go. And so after some negotiation with my wife, which, we had our bags packed for Singapore, I was on a plane to London, and straight in front a bunch of competition lawyers, and trying to understand. They told me I had 24 hours to come up with the synergies of the iron ore division. What could be possible by merging the two iron ore businesses?
Yes. And
that to me was an experience that even today I look back and I think it was fabulous. I don't think too many people would have had the experience of meeting the European Commission, going to Brussels and arguing in front of a bunch of fairly educated lawyers of the European Commission saying that this merger was in the greater good and not anti-competitive.
Yes.
And they were very hostile.
Yes.
So I presented, I think, 6 times to the European Commission, about 3 times to the ACCC here in Australia. There was the Japanese regulators, there was MOFCOM in China. It was global. Yeah, it was an amazing experience. In the end, the global financial crisis...
Because we're talking about 2008, yes.
Yeah, Maria stopped it, right? Because the world was in turmoil. But we then tried to re-engage on a production joint venture, but again, the regulators couldn't get their head around it. But if you think about it today, what could have been?
Do you ever think and look back at that?
Yeah, well, my offsider that I would communicate and pass messages on to was Simon Trott.
Is that right?
Yes.
Oh, gosh. And so there you go. And look where he is now. And shout out to Simon. Well done. You went on to become Vice President, Strategy, Development and Planning, which is a big title.
Yeah.
Particularly after having just gone through that takeover. Clearly you'd, I would say, risen up the ranks a little bit further,
yes,
so to speak, and Marius was still in charge.
Yes. What that role gave me that my previous roles didn't have was an operations focus more directly. So I had exploration reporting to me.
Yes.
And we were drilling 500 kilometres a year of holes through the Pilbara, getting the next ore bodies ready for development, South Flank, Marillana, Ministers North, all these deposits. We had a huge mineral inventory that we knew very little about, right? So we needed to go out and understand these. So what that role in exploration did, given how many people I had, I started to get a sense of leading teams again.
Yeah. We had about 1,000 people reporting to you.
Yeah. So learning, the safety elements, cost elements, and getting myself back into that front line.
Yeah.
In addition, I also had exploration, but then mine planning. We had a huge mine planning division, right? So take the data out of exploration and how do I put that into sensible mine plans? What order do we bring these mines into production to ensure we get the right blend? And that's where the strategy and business planning come into.
Yeah. Well, the budget, I was just reading your control of a budget in excess of US $500 million.
Yeah.
Just the size and scale of it.
Yeah. Again, you can get lost in the numbers, but yes, it was.
Tony, a tough part of this journey was obviously the Samarco Dam disaster. Did you want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, I will, Tim.
Obviously it's a tragedy. So
well,
it's that sort of goes without saying.
And there isn't a day or a week that I don't have thoughts about what happened.
It's 10 years ago now.
Mm.
You maintained your role with BHP, continued on. There's only a very few that would have ever experienced this.
Mm. Yeah, and again, it comes down to my earlier point around resilience and being true to yourself, right? Understanding your strengths and weaknesses, relying on people you trust, and I did that a fair bit. Long walks with people that I could bounce ideas off because it was a pressure cooker environment.
Yes.
And I sort of continued that sort of approach to this day.
Yeah.
And really, for people that know me well, what you see is what you get with me.
Yes.
But integrity is very, very important, and transparency. So all those things, when I was dealing with the issues, all I could do was tell it as I saw it and played a straight bat.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think people respected that, which then led me to another sort of angle, which I remember I was thinking at the time, should I move from BHP? Should I stay? And I got a call from Mike Henry saying, we want you to lead this piece of work, Tony, around, the next productivity improvement horizon frontier.
Yes.
How does BHP set itself up for operating excellence?
Yes.
So that was a tremendous journey, which I can touch on.
Yeah, absolutely, because we're sort of tailing into the final sort of 4 or 5 years of your time with BHP. And tell us a little bit about that.
Well, Mike was leading the biggest division of BHP called Minerals Australia. And what he wanted was to take the operating philosophy to another level where we could make a step change. And so we did a piece of work where we looked at who is the best in the world at operating, who was able to deliver reliable and consistent performance operationally. So we pulled together a team that was comprised of very high caliber people across the organisation, and I was privileged to lead, to try and understand who does this well. And so that took me to visit many operations around the world, many different companies outside of mining. So Procter & Gamble, McDowell, Donald, who was the aircraft designers, the Japanese underground, the company that runs the Japanese underground.
Yeah.
I'll tell you a little bit about that in a minute. And I started building an understanding of how Toyota was another one, clearly. How do they do the things they do so well and so consistently? And it quickly became obvious that there were a couple of elements. People, and it starts with people. How do you unleash the capability of the individual, right? And what we found was people value most self-development.
Yes.
You can pay, you can, increase their salary. That's self-actualizing for a short period of time, but ultimately people want to get better.
Yeah.
So personal development.
Consistent improvement
was the route to this success.
Yes.
So you had to say, well, how do I unleash that ability for people to improve, right? So the company would have to commit to training, but the company had to commit to letting individuals develop to their full potential. So one of the CEOs said to me, Tony, let me tell you a story about allowing people to develop to their full potential. When I walk with my wife, the family dog, along the beach, I have a fairly tight lead to the dog.
Yes.
And my wife said, well, why don't you let the dog go? And he said, well, no, the dog gets into other fights and I can't control him. I want to keep him close on the lead. So then I went back, reflected on what my wife said and said, well, maybe I'll go and get a longer lead. So I went for a walk the following day with a longer lead so the dog got more scope. So the message I have for you, Tony, if you want to lead people, do you lead them with a short lead, a longer lead, or no lead? And I struggled. No lead? No. In a workplace, you need to give them parameters and battery limits.
Yes.
And he said, no, this is this fallacy that we have around, I'm going to hold you, Tim, to account.
Yep.
The organisation you really want is where individuals hold themselves to account.
Yeah.
Right? So this is where we developed the BHP operating system. And in service of the line, how do we unlock that potential in the individual? The no lead. It's a big step for us to take. It's a little bit...
For a large organisation like BHP.
Yeah.
And it's clearly successful.
And we see the results that Mike has delivered in his tenure as CEO, right? That continual performance and the reliability that shareholders have. And once you have that winning formula, then the theory was you could acquire other companies that weren't performing as well and apply that operating model onto there and then lift the performance.
Yeah.
And Danaher is another one that's unbelievable company. They were doing that, and they could get benefit from acquiring businesses and putting the Danaher operating system over the top and lift the performance.
It's fascinating. And so, I mean, really...
I'll just finish this.
Yeah, sure.
The Tokyo Underground. When I met with them, I said, well, what's your key driver
Which
here?
they would have to have, obviously.
Well, you know the Japanese train system, you can, set your clock to it, right? They're that precise. And I said, so what's the key? And they said, well, training. We want the drivers to be exceptional. They need to understand how they get the maximum, because our sole reason for being, Tony, is to get someone from A to B on time. So I said to him, well, how much time, what's your KPI in terms of delays? And he said, well, have a guess. I said, for the year, maybe all your train service, I don't know, an hour and a half?
Yeah.
The year? He said, I'd be out of business if it was an hour and a half, Tony. It's 2 seconds.
That was the budget of...
Delay for the year for the underground. 2 seconds, that's... And I'm thinking Trans-Perth, right? They do a great job. But I said, that's cultural. It can't be replicated in the Western world. That's a Japanese thing. And he said, no, we're training the New York subway to do the same thing. And that we've got them down to 54 seconds.
For their year budget.
Yeah. So I thought, when people in Australia, if we say we've got to have a pursuit of excellence, they say, no, it's too high a hurdle. It's unachievable. No. It can be done. That pursuit, that never-ending drive, that push for continuous improvement, you've got to have that.
Yeah.
Because if you shoot for the stars and reach the moon, well, that's a great outcome.
Absolutely. It's quite inspiring. Well, I think when you look at that experience with BHP, it all plays into how you've played out your role at Liontown.
Mm.
I'll start with that by just saying you received a phone call from the chairman of Liontown, Tim Goyder, in 2021, wanting to have a chat. How did that feel? Small company, where you were currently at, obviously you were dealing with the likes of the Japanese
underground.
Yeah.
Look, well, I think the call was quite timely because I had started to think about how do I pivot from here.
Yes,
and I did have thoughts in my mind, if I'm honest, around am I past my use-by date here? 18 years was a good stint. Mike had just been made CEO and he'd put together his management team. So I said to Tim, well, let's have a conversation. And I thought to myself, the apprenticeship I've had, I could put to really good use if I had a clean sheet.
Yes.
And I said to Tim, I'm not here just to build Kathleen Valley. I'm here to build a company, right? I know the building blocks. I've studied them. I've put them into practice. I've done every facet of the mining value chain. Right? Here's a clean sheet. And when I was recruiting people, I said to them, there's two sorts of people here. That those that want to buy the house but just renovate the kitchen and the bathrooms, and there's those that want to buy the block, build the house, and live in it at the same time.
Yes.
And they're the ones I wanted.
Yeah. So you obviously gave it some thought and you chose to join Liontown. They announced that you were to become CEO and MD effective on or around the 1st of May in 2021. And it was a big moment in terms of Liontown's next stage. And I note that because Tim Goyder's comment in the announcement. With Tony at the helm, I have every confidence that Liontown will be in very safe hands as we will make the all-important transition from explorer developer to mid-tier mining company. We are absolutely delighted that he has agreed to take up this opportunity. And that's when we start the Liontown story.
Yeah.
And at that time, how many employees did you have when you arrived?
4.
4? And your stock price?
Yeah, I think it was about 34 cents.
34 cents. You had Kathleen Valley and Buldania as the 2 projects. And that's when you started. And what, I mean, talk about a journey. But just give us a bit of an insight when you arrived.
Look, again, what captured me was the spirit that the board had around wanting to grow what they had, right? And when people ask me about Tim, you know, Tim's taught me 3 things. Firstly, never turn down an opportunity to meet someone, Tony, because everyone you meet is an opportunity. Tim's brilliant at that, right?
Yes.
The second thing was, you know, the glass isn't half empty or half full. It's overflowing, right? So you've got to remain optimistic. You've got to push through the bottoms and get through that resilience, knowing that we're going to get through it. Problems can always be solved. And the third thing he's taught me is that you got to have some fun and make some money. So, you know, I think and that's the philosophy, you know, my experience that I brought to the table, coupled with, you know, Tim's enthusiasm and, you know, his story.
Yes.
Right? And what he's had to endure personally.
Yes.
So a combination of those 2 things, you know, it's fantastic. I've had an absolute fabulous time, and the job's not done.
When you started out, when you looked at the scale of what you were going to produce in terms of plant and the ongoing business, it was a mighty, mighty project.
Yes, it was.
And I think drawing back to your experience over time with the delivery of capital projects, did you look at it and go, no, I can see this sequentially unfolding. I can see how it's going to go?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. You know, that the whole exercise, the skills and experience that I got from turning strategy into tangible action and then into execution, right? You know, where's the plan?
Yes.
What do I do first, right? What order? You know, these sorts of things. It was not by chance. There was a carefully thought through plan that we had to put into execution. Bring on the customers, finish the DFS so we had something to talk to customers about. Once we locked in the customers and the DFS, then it was about funding, and so it went. So there was that sort of execution-focused plan and then work the plan.
Yes. So you managed to, in the early stages, obviously bring the likes of Ford, LG and Tesla into the mix. And that obviously gave you the opportunity to secure offtake and then start the process.
Yes.
The business plan was well developed by then, but was it an easy task to get these, you know, high profile clients on board?
Very good question. What we had to do was, how do we differentiate ourselves from some of the others that these people are getting knocks on the door from?
Yes.
Right. So it's really around the you know, we've got the quality of the asset.
Yes.
Right. The jurisdiction, the well thought through DFS, and it's around building a credible case that we had what it needed to be in order to develop this project, right? So giving that confidence to those 3 customers was the key.
Yes. And that allowed you to start and build one of the largest lithium producers globally and Australia's first underground lithium mine. The strategy for Liontown going forward in terms of enduring through the cycle, your first horizon is bringing Kathleen Valley to its full potential. And then Horizon 2 is the downstream processing. And then Horizon 3 is grow Liontown to its full potential.
Mm.
Am I right?
Yes.
When you look back at the last year and where you've come with Liontown since you joined in 21, it must give you a sense of pride in what you've been able to do in what has been a very, very bullish lithium market to what has been a very depressed lithium market and the challenges you've had to go through there.
Look, I can't say enough about how much pride and satisfaction it's given to me to see what the team has been able to deliver with the support of the board. And, we haven't spoken about that, but you can only deliver this type of achievement with a very capable board, and that's what we've got.
Yes.
But when I look at it and I say, well, would I have loved to ramp up into a market that was far more conducive? Yes, clearly. I'm ramping up and the price has dropped 90%.
Yeah.
In fact, in the last 3 months, it dropped, before this little rebound, dropped another 30%. So, you cannot cut costs or change a business effectively when you have your revenue line coming off so quickly.
Yes.
Everything you do will be blunt.
Yes.
And we've been able to navigate that.
Well, I was going to say, this is the interesting part. You deliver your first shipment to LG in September 24, 16 shipments in FY25. So to your point, you're ramping. Everything's starting to go like clockwork. But then you had to pivot because the market declined, revised strategy, your mine plan, aggressive business optimization program, delivering savings and deferred costings. I suppose that's where having a great board and a great management team help in terms of trying to deliver an outcome.
Yeah. And also what helps is a long apprenticeship.
Yes.
Having worked in mining, having worked in the big end of town, as Tim calls it, cost reduction exercises were unfortunately frequent. This is one of the things the BHP operating system was trying to avoid, this boom-bust type thing with your costs.
Yes.
Right? But so I knew the recipe in my head, right? And so I understood what I had to do in the face of this declining price because I'd been there many, many times.
Yes.
So it was all about bringing the team along and putting in place what we had to put in place, right? And there's a phase 2 and there's ultimately a phase 3. So my apprenticeship has served me well in trying to understand what I had to do to confront this difficult situation.
But continue the business in terms of production schedules. The largest paste plant. I could go on.
Yeah.
But, in light of that as well.
Yes. And just the paste plant, it's bigger than a lot of gold plants.
Yeah.
Right? It's a huge facility.
So let's just talk about FY26 or I think I read that you were calling it a transition year. Okay. A good way to transition that is just to talk about the lithium market right now. And I will preface that by saying that Liontown's just come off of a fantastic raising of 316 million. So, and we can talk about that in a bit of detail, but the lithium market at the moment, just take us back, say, to when the lithium market was flying to where we are now and the challenges that are in play. And I think then we can go and look at FY26 and 27 with some background. And I'm doing this for the listeners as well so that everyone's on board with what Liontown is navigating.
Yeah, so if we go back when we were doing the study and then started construction, spodumene prices were at all-time highs. And what was the genesis of that increase in price was primarily a supply shortage. And what we had in play was scarcity pricing, because you had this massive demand or potential demand. Everyone was forecasting, all the car manufacturers are coming out with fairly aggressive growth curves. So the market is looking at those very aggressive demand consequences and then saying, how do we bring supply into that world? And what's happened is those demand expectations and forecasts have come off.
Yes.
They're still pretty good. I mean, a 20% CAGR is not, I think a lot of industries would love that, but it's not 25 or 26. What happened is the supply, well, it started to build in order to meet those aggressive targets.
Yes.
The targets have come off, but you can't stop the supply being built.
It's come on stream.
It's come on stream. And supply is lumpy. You get one big kick. So now we've had to face this last 2.5 years, a period of time where we've had to digest that oversupply. Demand has continued to grow. There's been a couple of regions where it's backed off, the US, right? But it's not the center of the universe in terms of the EV. This is a global phenomena. But Europe, last year it looked like it was coming off, but it's come on strong. So we've had this period of oversupply that we've had to chew our way through.
The demand side, the movement of Europe and the rest of the world, not just North America, is one point. That's a positive point. But the Chinese government and their concern about overcapacity and the propensity for the Chinese economy to overbuild. Now, I heard you use this term involution. Could you just explain that and how you see that unfolding?
Yeah, before I launch into that, what I will say is, whilst the markets are growing globally, the leader by far is China.
Right.
Their car manufacturing capability has surprised the world. And the quality has surprised the world. They are now the leader by far in electric vehicle manufacture. Right? So with that comes an ecosystem of a supply chain to service that world-leading EV manufacturing. So you need battery production, you need chemicals production, precursor materials, all that stuff. And what Chinese industry does and does well, given their low capital intensity, is build capacity.
Yes.
Across the board. You've seen it in many sectors. Solar panel production. They've built so much capacity that solar panels plummeted. Consumer goods. There was a time, why is everything so attractive in Bunnings, right?
Yes.
Because everything's done at mass production, right? This capacity to build. And I think from what we can read, the Chinese government is starting to say, we've got to stop this race to the bottom. This overcapacity, this pursuit of the very lowest cost. We need to build brands, and we need to build brands that attract a premium. Right?
Interesting.
So I think you've seen, not just in the lithium space, you're seeing it in the steel making, steel mills and the overcapacity in steel mills and et cetera, et cetera. So I think the government, the Premier and the President have publicly said their focus on this. Now, the recent closure of the CATL mine for permitting is the federal government clamping down and saying, well, actually, this was not permitted as a lithium mine or a lepidolite mine, it was permitted for something else. So it's their way of coming in and making it more difficult to permit a mine and therefore monitor the capacity.
Yes. But I mean, when you talk about CATL, that's the world's largest manufacturer of electrical vehicle batteries.
Yes. So
it's a pretty big suspension.
Yes, it is. And
for 3 months.
Whether it's 3 months or...
That's what I've read.
Yeah, or whether more or less. What I will illustrate to your listeners is, here's a mine that has a capacity of 90,000 tonnes on an LCE basis, which represents about 20% of China's production, about 6 to 7% of global production. and there's an immediate price response.
Yes.
Spodumene's now close to $1,000. From June 6, it was $580. So what that tells me, Tim, is the difference between oversupply and a deficit isn't that great.
Has narrowed.
Yes. So chomping through the supply, it's chomped through to the point where one mine closure of 90,000, 6% of the global production, is enough to make that sort of impact to price.
Yes, the scale's tipped a little bit. Yeah, really interesting, Tony. But just on the other note, energy storage is obviously going to be a big theme as well.
Yes.
So the energy storage market, the demands coming out of that area is going to be something that's clearly playing into Liontown's backyard.
Yes, I think it's positive from, again, more demand units coming from a different sector.
Yeah.
The more diversity you can get in the demand for lithium units, the better. So we're not dependent on solely EVs.
No.
There's now stationary batteries, and there's a couple of other segments that are emerging, right? Depending on who you talk to, robotics and AI is another future sector. When I looked at the prospectus for CATL when it recently listed on the Hong Kong Exchange, it made quite a big deal of that stationary battery and potential AI element in their prospectus.
Yes. So they're well aware of it. I'm conscious of time, Tony. I just wanted to quickly draw back to your recent capital raising, and it included $50 million from the National Reconstruction Fund Corporation, the government, which is just fantastic from your perspective. And then also CanMax, a large industrial conglomerate, one of the world's leading producers of lithium chemicals and a significant consumer of lithium raw materials. It's quite a different backing of some very large organisations, one being the government and one being CanMax. Must have been very rewarding.
Yes, it was. And if I touch on the government first and the National Reconstruction Fund, look, we've had several opportunities with various government agencies in order to secure additional funding. Originally, we were in discussions with Export Finance Agency. We were also in discussions with the Clean Energy Fund Corporation, but we couldn't get the debt package alongside commercial banks across the line. The National Reconstruction Fund had a slightly different mandate. It was able to invest into the critical minerals industry, but not only critical minerals, other industries. It's got a very wide-ranging mandate. And one of the things we saw in its mandate was its ability to invest at a debt level, but also at an equity level.
Yes.
So we commenced engagement with NRF, and over a period of 4 to 5 months, through significant due diligence, we were able to convince them to be their first equity investment, pure equity. They did a convertible note for another rare earths player, but this was their first equity play. And it was very, very beneficial for us because it cornerstoned the equity raise. It was a strategic we were able to bring in and underpin the raise.
Yes. Fantastic.
And then on CanMax,
yes,
well, having probably the world's largest refiner of chemicals, lithium chemicals, on our register, had tremendous insight into the Chinese battery value chain, has a very close relationship with CATL, the largest battery producer in the world. We thought strategically that would be
a great fit. You must feel uplifted at the moment. You know, the balance sheet's shored up. Everything's looking good.
Yeah, look, where we're at, I'm very, very happy. But I do know the job's not done, right? We need to finish the ramp up of underground and then set the company up in steady state. And then we want to build the company, right? We talk about the strategy and the horizons.
Yes.
We're really starting to focus now on Horizon 2 and possibly Horizon 3. We want to come out of this bigger than what we started.
Yeah, yeah. Very clear. Just generally in life, Tony, I know we hark back to your Italian heritage. You love Italian food still?
Yes, yes, too much.
Too much.
And my mates ribbed me for it. I can't deviate. Whilst I like other cuisines, don't get me wrong, the centre of the universe is Italian cuisine.
Well, follow on from that is you've got a beautiful family, wife and 3 daughters.
Yes.
They all love your love of Italian food as well.
Yeah, well, they like it as much as I do,
Great.
to be honest. And my wife is true blue, Aussie, of Scottish and Welsh background. And to her credit, she's a fabulous cook. And she learnt a lot off my mother. And in some dishes that she cooks, I think, with all due respect to Mum, she's topped her.
Oh,
Right?
Look, when we talk about family and love of life, how have you found the work-life balance as a general rule?
No, I've got to do a bit of work there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been criticised by the family of being one-dimensional, and so I need to find a hobby. Right, it may be music.
It might be the drums.
It might be the drums. So I've really got to branch out.
Yeah. Look, Tony, as I say, I'd love to chat for a lot longer. There's so much more to cover, but in the interests of providing a conclusion, it's been a great chat. I really have enjoyed it. And you are absolutely spot on when you say you wear your heart on your sleeve and what you see is what you get. And for the listener, the transparency of Tony's body language and his passion has just come through loud and clear. You made the big move from big business to small business and you've been able to pull it off, which is quite amazing when you think about
Yes.
the 18 years you spent with BHP.
Yes.
And your achievements with Liontown are testament to that. So overall, on behalf of all of us at Euros Hartleys, I want to say thanks very much for joining us on Finding the Front. It's been a wonderful chat. It really has. And I've learned a lot. And I can't wait for the next one when we get a chat to see how Liontown's progressed down the track. But we've learned a lot and it's been fantastic. So thanks a lot, Tony.
Well, Tim, thank you for having me on the show. I will say your style and your ability to sort of draw out these points is a testament to you. So thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. Good on you, mate.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to Euros Hartleys Finding the Front. This podcast is for general information purposes only. Please check out euroshartleys.com for more information. Euros Hartleys holds Australian Financial Services Licence 230052.